In today's video, I want to show you a few pieces of code that turned out to be very useful when I worked on my text mining project about the term neoclassical economics. This code might be helpful for you if you are dealing with a large number of data sets, or if you want to reshape your data, or if you want to learn a little more about customizing your colors and themes when plotting your data. Before we begin, we will need to load the tidyverse, ggplot2, and rcolor brewer packages. Next, we want to import our data. I found myself with a lot of individual files and did not want to create an object for every single one of them because that would clutter my environment. So I created a nested data frame, which is essentially a list of data frames. Here's how you do that. First, make sure all the files you want in the nested data frame are in one folder. I have two folders, one with data from mainstream economics journals from 1970 to 1989, which I called main folder 1970, and one with data from the same journals for the 1990 to 2020 period. I can't immediately combine both folders into one nested data frame because all files in one nested data frame need to have the same number of columns. My 1970 to 1989 files have 21 columns, the 1990 to 2020 files have 31. So I need to create two nested data frames before combining them. What we do first is create a vector that inputs all the files in one folder. I'm going to call it big main 70v here for vector. Then we create our nested data frame by simply reading in the list of CSV files. We're going to call this one big main 70df. And here we have our first nested data frame. Now, I want to have all my mainstream economics journal data in one big data frame, not just the data from 1970 to 1989. So we want to join the two data frames. First, that means repeating what we just did for main folder 1990. Now it's time to combine the two data frames. Since I just want to attach the columns from my big main 90 data frame to the end of my big main 70 data frame, I can simply use the bind calls function. And voila, we have all the data in one large nested data frame. The one thing I don't like about this is that I get two extra columns between 1989 and 1990, which I don't need, but that's easily remedied. Just return to your bind calls function, pipe, and add the select function. Here you're essentially unselecting the two columns that we want to get rid of. While I'm at it, I will also rename the first two columns by piping in the rename function. And then we run that code again. Looks much nicer. Next, we want to shape our data. I know for certain that I don't want one column for each year, but rather one column that contains all the years. To reshape our data, we use the pivot function. First, we redefine big main as big main and then the pivot function. However, I want to accept the first two columns from being pivoted because I want to keep file name and terms as they are. And now big main looks like this. There's one more thing we need to do before we can start plotting our data. Right now, R understands the values in the year column to be a string, not a numeric value. We want to change that. We do that by creating an identical column to the year column, only we define the values to be numeric. We're going to go big main $, year n. This is what we're going to call the new column to distinguish it from the character column. There we go, a numeric replica of the year column. Now it's time to plot. We begin by calling big main and then filtering for the file we want. In this case, I want to see a plot of the American Economic Review, AER for short. You can filter for anything you want, so I will also filter for just two of the terms in my data, neoclassical economics and neoclassical synthesis. After filtering, I pipe to a simple geom line. Well, that's a little overwhelming. I would like my plot to actually be intelligible. In this case, it might help to zoom out a little bit. Notice that the frequency on the y-axis only goes to a little more than 2%. We can increase that to look at the picture from a little further away. Just add plus chord Cartesian, and then you can define the columns that you want on the x-axis and the numbers you want on the y-axis. Much better. Next, I want to change the gray background. I find it a little distracting. I want a simple white background. so I type plus theme classic. If you don't know what background you want, you can simply try the suggestions or type theme in the search bar to find a list of all the themes included in ggplot. Finally, I want to make sure my colors are easy to discern even for those with particular kinds of color blindness. This is where our Color Brewer package comes in. To see which color palettes they offer that are also colorblind friendly, run display.brewer.all, open parentheses, colorblind friendly equals true in your console. I will go ahead and pick dark 2. I'll add plus scale underscore color underscore brewer, open parentheses, palette equals dark 2. There you go. In just a few steps, we created a nested data frame, shaped our data, and created a decent looking plot. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and happy coding.